All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming to this International Student Career Panel. To start off, the International Students and Scholar Services team is going to provide a brief overview and outline of the different kinds of employment authorizations that are available to F1 and J1 international students at Loyola, followed by a similar introduction from the Career Services team of the services and resources they provide students seeking employment. If you're here, you're probably, but maybe not all, students who are getting ready to graduate, and you might be thinking about or planning on applying for OPT if you're an F1 student, or academic training if you're a J1 student. So thank you again for coming, and we will conclude with, I guess the main show will be our international student panelists, who we will introduce here in a little bit, and we'll have a kind of guided discussion with them and hear a little bit about their professional and academic background and how they've navigated the graduation, post-graduation sort of experience, specifically in regards to OPT. And yeah, and then we will conclude with a Q&A with everybody. So I guess I'll go ahead and start. My name is Scott, and I'm an international student advisor in the ISSS office. I advise students with last names N through Z. So we've probably met before. And welcome. I will turn it over to Jen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's International Student Career Panel. My name is Jen. I am the other International Student Advisors here at International Student and Scholar Services, which also refers as ISSS. So similarly as Scott, I primarily work with our F1 and J1 students who's attending Loyola. And yeah, welcome to the panel again, and I will turn it to Edith.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Edith Sanchez, and I'm a career advisor here with our Career Services office. And I work with students interested in marketing, advertising, and PR, mainly undergrads and alumni. Pass it to Al.
Thanks, Edith. Hello, everybody. My name is Alistair, or Al. I'm one of our associate directors. Edith and I are two members of a much larger team of career advisors that support y'all during your time here and then also 5 years beyond. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the services we offer that you may have already taken advantage of when we get to our time in the program. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background as somebody who is a former international student, recent citizen who has gone through the entire process from F1 visa through to OPT, EAD, green card, etc. Thanks for being here, and I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. All right. So very quickly, we're going to go over the different kinds of employment authorization for F1 and J1 students at Loyola. Well, most of you are probably here to discuss and think about OPT, but we also want to just briefly remind you of the other authorizations that are available to students. So we have on-campus employment, curricular practical training, which is primarily a work authorization that you'd participate in while you're still a student, while you're enrolled at Loyola. And then there's academic training, which if you're a J1 visa holder, this would apply to you both during and after your program, depending. And then finally, optional practical training, or OPT, which is a post-graduation work authorization. Jen, do you want to take it from there?
Well, today's session, since we are mainly focused on students journeys after graduation, so we're not going to talk about the on-campus employment. So as just Scott mentioned, there are other 3 types of employment, depending on if you are J1 or F1 student. So OPT, which is optional practical training, that's for like F1 student. It is like a temporary employment authorization after you complete your program at Loyola. So in general, you will need to find a job that is directly related to your field of study, and you need to work full time, which means 20 hours or more per week. So you will need to get an I-20 from ISSS. It's called I-20 with OPT recommendation. So you can officially apply with USCIS, which is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So as I just mentioned, OPT, it can be paid or unpaid, but it has to be related to your field of study, and it is a 12-month work authorization. After OPT, you will have a 60-day grace period during which you can plan your future, such as transfer your visa, transfer your service record to another U.S. institution, or start a new program at Loyola, or prepare to depart the U.S. If you have any questions or need assistance just to get the OPT I-20, please contact our office.
All right. CPT. So curricular practical training is available to F1 students who are still enrolled in their program at Loyola. The spirit of CPT employment is that you may have an internship or a job or an experiential learning opportunity off campus that may complement or supplement your studies at Loyola. Some programs require, have required internships and things like that. So those tend to qualify under CPT. CPT must be an integral part of an established curriculum and directly related to the student's major area of study. And you must have completed a full academic year at Loyola before being eligible for CPT. There are exceptions to students in graduate programs where they might have off-campus kind of training or fieldwork requirements as soon as they begin studying. And CPT must be pre-authorized by ISSS each term that you are applying or working. Something to remember. If you have questions about CPT at all, please contact Jen or myself, or just the ISSS office in general.
And AT, which is for J1 student, is called like academic training. So it is similarly as like CPT. So it allows students in the J1 status to gain practical experience in their field of study. So AT can be used during or after the J1 program. So this is a little bit different from the F1 student. So for J1 student, you can begin like AT as soon as your program starts, or you can choose to do it after your program ends. However, this authorization is employer and date specific, and it must be pre-authorized with ISSS. So in general, you will need to submit an AT request in the ISS portal for us to give you the authorization. And for J1 student, you must receive the DS 2019 with AT authorization before you can actually start working. If you have any questions regarding to the academic training, please do not hesitate to reach out to our office and we can further assist you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the ISSS portion of this event, and I will turn it over to Alistair now.
Thanks, Scott. So obviously there's a lot going on in the present moment that's affecting international students in general, but it's always a challenge to secure employment post-graduation. As somebody who's had to navigate it, I can empathize with much longer time ago that I navigated it, but I can empathize with how stressful and how confusing it can be. From a career exploration and job search standpoint, I want you all to know that we have dedicated career advisors year-round available to meet with you all in person or virtually including if you are meeting with us from another country or a different time zone. If you haven't already met with one of us, I strongly recommend you schedule a time with us. The easiest way to do this is to do it through Handshake. If you have any questions at all about Handshake or about scheduling time with us, I'll be happy to answer them when we get to the back end of the program, but I want to get to our student panel as quickly as possible so that you all can have a chance to hear from some students who have successfully navigated what you may be attempting to navigate right now. But what I would say is just as general best practices for those who are looking to secure a job post-graduation as an international student. One, be informed and in a position to inform potential employers on your status. I think that's one of the things that we come across most often is students or soon-to-be graduates assume that employers are informed on their work status in this country. Usually they are not. And typically they just think that you cannot work here. So be comfortable communicating OPT, what that means, especially if you have, for example, the option for STEM extension, being able to advocate for yourself as a candidate and as an international student is really important. So be comfortable communicating that with employers. The earlier you start on everything, the better. So if you haven't met with us yet, if you haven't met with ISSS yet, the sooner you do that, the better, because you tend to want a longer runway when you are applying for roles as an international trying to stay in this country, either as an intern or taking advantage of OPT. So the sooner you get out in front of that, the better. And finally, the last sort of thing I'll recommend, and then we can pivot to the panel to expand on this further and talk about how they've found success during their time here. Be thinking about employers that have a global presence, that might have a presence in your country of origin, because that can make you a more appealing candidate. And also, I encourage people all the time, if you are fluent in other languages, look for roles that require that fluency. You'd be shocked at how much that differentiates you as a candidate when it comes to applications. So happy to answer more questions later, happy to continue this part of the conversation towards the end, but I want to throw that out there now before we get into the panel itself.
Thank you so much, Alistair. Well, without further ado, I would like to introduce two of our panelists. We have here Abby Abuya and Marta Vigel. Marta, would you like to get started? Please introduce yourself. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for these incredible chances to be here today. Thank you to ISSS. Thank you to Career Services for holding this panel discussion. You may have noticed I have a French accent, so if you don't understand anything, just let me know at the end. I will be happy to repeat, okay? So my name is Marthe Piguel. I was born and raised in Cameroon, which is a country located in Central Africa. And I got a scholarship at the end of my high school to go to study in France. It was just only one scholarship for the entire country. So it was pretty much a good achievement, and I was very happy to get that. So I went to France. I studied over there during 5 years. I sat for the Paris bar exam. I got it, and I started working in international law firm in Paris during 2 years as a trainee lawyer. And I wanted to apply for a position as an associate to deal with mining and oil and gas in Africa, but they told me, you don't know anything about US law. Your English is not as good as we want. So it might be a good idea to go to the US. So I applied to Loyola University Chicago for me, which was, the best fit. And I graduated in May with an LLM in US law in May 2023. So, and I started working under the OPT program, first of all, in New York remotely. And I went to work on site in New York for a law firm, which was basically advising French company willing to do business in the US. So this is pretty much my background. I know we are we have a lot to cover, so I will stop there and we can, move with another candidate.
Thank you so much. Abby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I don't know if I'm going to be able to meet the standard that Martha has set. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Abuya, and I ended up doing 2 degree programs at Loyola. The first one was the LLM. I got my LLM in US law. Sorry, I'm just clearing out a cough. I got my LLM in US law in May 2022, and then I did my OPT then for 8 months before going back to Loyola in January of 2023 to do to take my doctorate of law degree. I finished that sometime in mid-January, December 15th. I wrote my dates down so I wouldn't forget. So I finished in December 15th of last year. Graduated because there's no graduation ceremony for people who graduate in the winter, but I graduated sometime in early January, before mid-January. And then after that, well, prior to finishing my JD, I took the bar exam in July of last year, because in the US, if you're gonna work as an attorney, you have to take the bar exam in a state here. So I took the bar exam here, passed last year in New York. And then so I started applying for a job from, I would say, mid-November. I worked with the Career Services Office at the law school in downtown, and applied, and I think I spent most of January and half of February interviewing and applying for jobs and receiving rejections. And I can talk about that later once the question is prompted. But ultimately, I applied for my OPT February 5th. I received my approval notice just about 2 weeks later, I think on the 23rd of the same month. And then the EAD, the employment authorization document, was shipped on the 27th of February, about 2 days after it was approved. And then I received it on, I think, the 4th of March. And I started working at the place I'm working now, which has an amazing view, on the 24th of March. So that's the long and the short of it.
Awesome, thank you, Abby. Well, so just building off of where you just stopped there, Abby, I'm curious, for both of you, I mean, you mentioned like the dates and applying for OPT and then receiving the EAD card.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like, or what is it like, kind of balancing the demands of the OPT application process with basically the needs of, you know, job applications and employers who are interviewing you, who may themselves, they have their own deadlines.
Right.
It sounds from my perspective, it sounds complicated. So I'm wondering if both of you could speak to that experience a little bit.
Sure. I'll get started, and then I'll let Martha give her opinion. I'll say personally, for me, it was a very nerve-wracking situation, I'll be honest, because I finished in mid-December when not that many people are looking to hire. I think people are just looking to finish the year and enjoy Christmas and New Year's. So I had a few interviews, and I think about 2 or 3, and that was pretty much it. So I chose not to submit my application because I knew that once I submit the application and it gets approved, then the clock is going to start running. And I wanted to ensure that I maximized on the 60-day period as much as I possibly could, while also making sure that I don't get a job offer and I can't start working because I don't have the EAD. And I will be honest, I had a few offers that were issued. I ultimately opted to decline them for different reasons, but I was glad that I didn't opt to go with those companies or law firms, because even if I'd have said yes, I would have had to tell them, okay, I have to wait about 1 month to 8 months, depending on when USCIS approves my OPT before I can start working, which is obviously a way to just tell the employer, don't hire me. So what I opted to do was I waited until I interviewed with a law firm that I really liked, and I passed the second interview. And then once they told me that they wanted to give me an offer, I submitted my application. It was a very risky move because they could have given me the offer and asked me to start within 1 week, and I would not have been able to start because I didn't know how long the OPT was going to go. But I had reached out to some people who already worked in that law firm and asked them the time period within which they typically, from issuing the offer and your start date, and I was told it's pretty much about 3 weeks because they do very extensive background checks, and there's like a lot of procedure on their end that takes up about 2 to 3 weeks. So once I also reached out to a few of my former classmates who had applied for OPT in the winter and discovered that, okay, the waiting period for them was about 4 to 6 weeks. I decided to jump the gun and apply, submit my application. I think literally the day they told me they were planning on giving me an offer is when I submitted the application. And I think I was just lucky it worked out in that way, but I would not recommend that anyone do what I did. It was very risky.
Martha, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Abby, for sharing this. For me, it was a bit much more complicated. When I came to the US in May, I think it was in August 22, the first thing that I did, I didn't even need to go through the OPT program. I started looking for a job. I started in November 2022 for a position in September 2023. So 1 year ahead, because I knew already that it could be something very complicated. So I got 3 offers around March. The first one was in Philadelphia and New York, 6 months in Philadelphia and 6 months in New York, but not paid. And the employer didn't know anything about OPT. So I needed to explain that I had to apply first with my school to get authorization, and after submit the application to I think USCIS and to get the ED card and start working. So they had a deadline. They wanted me to start in August 1st, which wasn't possible. So I just crossed that offer. I received another offer to start mid-August. Again, they didn't know anything about, OPT. So as an international student, my duty was to let them know about the process, and they didn't really want to wait until the ED card to be issued. They were really in a hurry. So the last offer that I got was in September 1st. But unfortunately, because my executive director, she's very nice, but she's also really busy. She, approved my I think my request for the OPT, I think maybe 15 days after. So this delay was impacted the first day when I was supposed to start working. So instead of working on September 1st, I started working on September 15. And my employer was, I don't know what's going on with this ED card. You told us that you were supposed to receive it on September 1st. So they will start, asking you questions. And you, as an international student, you have to be very, very careful and explain that it's not your fault. You have to apply with your school. You have to apply with the administration. You have to wait until the ED card is issued to start working. So the key factor is, I think, is really communication. You have to explain to them that if you apply so early, it's because you know ahead that is going to take a long time. So I started working in September 15 instead of starting working in September 1st, because my ED card was issued a bit late, because I didn't receive the approval ahead from my executive director. But if you communicate very well throughout the process, they will understand. Some of them will let you down because they have deadlines. They need to hire people to handle cases. Some of them will understand and will wait for you. But if you don't communicate, at the end of the day, you will just end up with nothing. So really, communication is the key. Let them know about the OPT process. Otherwise, you will be surprised how, you know, you will end up with nothing. And the 3 months that you are supposed to stay in the US will just end, and you have to go back home or start over thinking about other opportunity to stay in the US.
Thank you, Martha. I have a bunch of different thoughts, but the first one I want to follow is that something that Alistair said in the beginning was that it's really important, if you can, to leverage and take advantage of your background as an international student in the job market. And at least in your case, Martha, I think you may be able to speak to the kind of language aspect of that Alistair brought up. Would you care to share?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Scott. I'm a French native speaker. So in my country, in Cameroon, we do speak 2 languages, English and French. But I was born in the French part, so I needed to learn how to speak English. So when I came to the US, I didn't look for law firm with English background. I knew that my value was the fact that I, you know, speak French. So I targeted French companies, are targeted French law firm, are targeted French U.S. companies as U.S. law firm with an office in Paris or an office in New York or an office in Philadelphia. So I was sending requests in Paris to partners for them to reach out to partners in New York saying, hey, we do have someone speaking French and we know you handle French clients. Maybe this is a good fit. And that's how I got my OPT, because I targeted a French law firm in New York City because I didn't find any here in Chicago, and that's how I got my position. But if you speak Hindi, you speak Mandarin, you speak Yoruba, you speak Spanish, this is a great fit, because this will give you an asset that the other people will not have. And when it comes to handling matters in your native language, you are much more comfortable. So when you apply, make sure that you know which companies can hire you based on your language, because that's how I got my position.
I think one thing that I'd like to add to what Martha said as an international is, I didn't mention this, but I come from Kenya, which is also an English-speaking country, but I'd practiced in Kenya for 2 years as a lawyer. And when I came here, I applied to more of the local and regional law firms who, I would say, struggled a little bit to understand my Kenyan experience. And so it took me switching strategies and applying to global law firms and global companies that had presence in various African countries and were exposed to different expertise levels from different cultures and countries outside of the US, for me to really get the type of feedback that I was looking for. So the law firm that I actually ended up accepting an offer with is a global law firm that has presence in my country as well, although I didn't really unfortunately leverage that. But when I interviewed with them, they were able to understand that I wasn't coming in as on an entry level, because I had experience from Kenya, which they felt they could leverage and translate into just, honing into experience that could be helpful for them in the US. And my experience with the more smaller law firms or companies that did not really interact with internationals in that aspect was they didn't feel like it would be something that they understand. Maybe it's just ignorance or lack of exposure or something like that, but it was really a difference in terms of how they approached my candidature for a job position. So yes, what Martha said, definitely leverage on your international expertise and the languages that you speak.
To quickly piggyback off of what Abby just said, and I love that y'all both mentioned how different assets tied to you being international were leveraged. It's a lot of people for example, in the US may also be fluent in Spanish, but if you have also, to Abby's point, like an actual connection to a certain part of the world where an employer has a presence or is attempting to grow their presence, understanding how those cultural norms operate, like understanding what it means to do business in that part of the world, is going to also set you apart. So it's not just that you speak the literal language of another place. If you understand what it means to do business in that part of the world, if you have a background either from having lived there most of your life or part of your life, that's another way to differentiate yourselves. And I mean, you know, the US is a developed country, it's a more developed economy. The growth here is not the same as it is in a lot of places that our international students come from. And you do have a lot of American businesses who are trying to expand into those regions. So having that perspective is something that you should lean into for sure. Not just that I can speak the language, but I understand how business happens here because I've lived here, you know, and it is a different perspective that you offer if you're from that country. I'm originally from the Bahamas. Things don't function the same there as they function here. Being from there helps me have a perspective that somebody who isn't from there wouldn't and couldn't have. So I love that y'all mentioned both like the language aspect of this, but also the cultural part of it as well.
I guess I'm also wondering now, in general, what I think that we're sharing a lot of advice and guidance and perspective here, and I'm wondering like if there are so you know, what are some of the most important or yeah, most central sort of pieces of maybe advice or guidance that you might have for your peers here at Loyola who are thinking about working after graduation, whether it be on OPT or another status or another work authorization. Or is there other wisdom that you could share before as we start moving towards the Q&A portion?
I think I would personally say this is something that I think a lot of people tell students, but I personally did not really pay a lot of attention to it, but the value of networking. Um, network. I can't say that enough. One of the reasons I got this job is because a friend of mine who I met in Loyola sent my resume to the managing partner and they created a position for me. This was not advertised or anything. And it was purely because there was someone here in this law firm who knew about me, knew that I was looking for a job, and was kind enough to say, hey, send me your resume, I'll forward it, and we'll see what happens. So I cannot emphasize enough the value of networking and attending a lot of all these events that are offered by the school, offered by whatever regional or state organizations within your career paths. It is so important to make those connections, not just to get you the job, but also maybe for the future if you need to leverage into a different job beyond what you currently have. So I'll say this job was because of networking, but I also received a bunch of other interviews also because of networking. And it wasn't just due to networking within my my field of study, which is the law. I networked with a few people who are in tax practice and finance and all that stuff. And I believe that was very helpful to my job search as well. I think the second thing that I would say is, as an international student coming into the US, you are coming in on a very limited time. And if you come in and decide, I might want to take advantage of the OPT option that's available to you after you graduate, like Martha did, start early, because the process of looking for a job in the US is not as easy or as quick as you might think. It's not as quick as looking. I mean, some people might look for 1 week and get it, but it definitely helps a lot if you start early and do a lot of research into looking into what qualifications beyond your degree might be required of you to get the job that you hope to get by the time you graduate. Do you need to take any exams? Do you need to network and connect with a certain caliber or type of people? Do you need to create whatever counts? I don't know, but just do a lot of research and get started as soon as possible, because you really just never know. A lot of the students at Loyola who are also in the doctorate program know where they're going to be working as early as 1 year before they graduate. So they're going to be doing the summer associate program this May, and by September, a lot of them will know where they're going to be landing for their jobs when they graduate in May and start working in August after taking the bar exam. So if they start a whole year or academic year in advance, I would recommend that you do the exact same, because the students, the native students, the American students who start, they start at an advantage because they don't have to worry about applying for OPT and all those timelines. So the sooner you do that, the better. So I think those are the two key pieces of advice that I would give.
Thank you, Martha. Would you like to share some extra wisdom?
Yes, I would like to add something too, is it's not about just finding a job, getting a job. It's getting a job that is going to help you to fulfill your experience. And we have to be honest, if you want to get a job, you want to get paid also. So the first thing
Stand by.
I think it might be a connection issue. While we're waiting for Marta to get back in, I would reiterate the importance of starting as early as you can when you're an international student. Everything, and you all are likely already
do not be worried about,
this.
I'm an international student. No one is going to hear me right now. Oh, okay. So I was just saying that do not be afraid of negotiating. You need to negotiate your salary, and do not say that you're an international student and what you had as a background in your native country does not have any value. So when you go to an interview, even if you're an international student, even if you're applying for OPT, make sure that you can request something. I'm saying this because the first two offers that I got, it was unpaid internship in New York. New York is very expensive. No one can live there without getting any salary. So the third offer that I received, I was able to negotiate, but they told me you have to come straight away in September and start working with us. And I didn't have a lot of money to go there. So I negotiate and told them that I can start in September until December remote. And after that, from January until the end of my OPT in July, I can work on site in New York City. So do not be afraid to negotiate. And what you did in your country has some value. So as Abby said, if you were, for example, a middle associate in India or a middle associate in China, come with that in your interview and try to bargain based on that. Do not just say, I'm an international student, I'm looking for an entry level. Be smart. Do not be aggressive, but just value your background. And the other thing that I would say is do not compare yourself to the other international students, because when you go to the interview, they will tell you that Loyola is not an Ivy League. You see, it's not Harvard, it's not Yale, it's not Princeton. So when you go to work in New York, they will tell you, why should we hire you instead of hiring someone from NYU, from Columbia, from Fordham? You just, graduated from Loyola. So when is that? You don't, you take it very easy and you try to explain that Loyola is a really great university. We received, a, a good, a good learning. And based on what you also received in your country, you combine both to make sure that your employee or your employer will trust you, because sometimes they do not want to hire OPT student because they are afraid that your knowledge on, I don't know, US law or medical law is not sufficient to give you the position. So for you, it's your duty to make sure that they understand that yes, you went to Loyola, yes, you had some experience in France or in Kenya or in India, but you are capable of meeting all the US standards based on your qualifications. That will be my two advice. Negotiate and trust your background and trust also what you learned at Loyola, and make sure that you can try to have a better salary based on that.
Thank you so much, Martha and Abby. Well, I think that we can start answering questions from our audience. If anybody would like to, we don't have a huge group, so if anybody would like to just unmute and ask, I think that might be okay. Otherwise, please feel free to type questions in the chat, or you can also use the